Good evening, hello, and welcome to another meetup of our series, An Evening With. Thanks for being with us today. So this evening we are hosting a meetup with our good friend and trainer, Jacopo Romei. Ciao, Jacopo.
Hi.
Hello.
Ciao.
So, Jacopo, today we'll talk about the feedback, and this talk actually links back to a talk he did 10 years ago called Software Feedback Loop. So today he'll be sharing what he learned since and many other things. You'll be amazed at the things Jacopo will tell us. But I won't dig into that too much. I will just remind you that you can use the YouTube chat that you can also use if you are on mobile, so you won't lose the screen if you open the chat. You can still listen to Jacopo talking. And I will be reading the questions out loud every 10-15 minutes, so we'll keep it more interactive like we've done other times. Last but not least, we just launched the English version of Jacopo's workshop called Risk Management for Freelancers, but again, there will be time to talk about it. I just wanted to mention that quickly, and now over to you, Jacopo.
Okay, ciao everybody. It's nice to be here once again, and this time to hold a session which is, yes, at the same time recalling back to the previous one, a very ancient one. I mean, it was 10 years ago. It was like 2010. But also, actually, this is the first time that I'm presenting this session, so I will be also getting some feedback about it. Pun intended. Okay, fine. Shall we start? Okay, fine. So everything started in 2010 when, after a few months exploring the concept of feedback, I realized that there are many ways that we can get feedback within software lifecycle. And you see, if we have a software value stream, this was it was September 2010, and actually the concept is mine, but it was the design. This quite elegant design was made by Ilaria Mauric, which I say ciao, just in case she is connected. And so. Actually, as you may see, I was already considering at the time stuff that we came used to discuss, like unit test pair programming, having a quick build, shared code, continuous integration, stand-up meeting, usability test. Even at the time, it was the beginning of my, I would say, fixation on contracts. And you already see that contracts are the first feedback loop that you can close about your software lifecycle. It was not called extreme contracts yet, but still, it was about contracts. I was starting experimenting with those that I ended up calling extreme contracts. And in the end, we got return on investment. So I was already aware that financial issues have to be taken into account in order to get a proper end-to-end feedback about our software.
Sorry, Jacopo, for interrupting. I don't know if you are meant to be sharing the screen, but we don't see it.
Yes, I just forgot to share it.
Ta-tam. The good of going live. There you go. Fantastic.
Can you see it? It's just a single slide. It's a single huge. Okay, so this is the image I was talking about. It was designed back in 2010, and you see all the feedback loops that I had mentioned so far. So you got the wireframe, unit test, pair programming, return of investment, and contracts, and so on. Okay, fine. This was the image, the infographic, the schema, the concept of feedback that I had, the model of feedback that I had in my mind back at the time. And when I looked back at this image after 10 years, I realized that something had changed during the last 10 years. I mean, from 2010 up to 2020. First, before we go on, and I present you this consideration, I want to define in a proper way what feedback is. So we talk about feedback every time we have a system in which a device, in a broad meaning, a device sends a signal, and the effects of that signal are fed back into the system itself. So, for example, we got back in the 19th century, we got the so-called centrifugal governor, which is a specific type of governor, which is something to regulate the behavior of steam engines, with a feedback system that controls the speed of an engine by regulating the flow of fuel or working fluid, like steam, so as to maintain a near constant speed. Basically, the faster it spins, the wider the masses go, and they close the valve, and they reduce the feeding of the engine. So it is said using the principle of proportional control. So basically, the engine feeds the governor accelerates, and accelerating the governor feeds back the engine by regulating it down. This is a so-called negative feedback loop. The thermostat is a device that everybody knows. Everybody has one in their houses. A thermostat is a component which senses the temperature of a physical system, your house, and performs actions so that the system's temperature is maintained near a desired set point. If your bedroom goes too cold, it turns on the fire, the boiler. If it turns too hot, the boiler gets shut down. A thermostat too operates as a closed loop control device, as it seeks to reduce the error between the desired and measured temperature. Basically, this is a way to introduce a key concept. Feedback is only based on closed loop system, because if you put a thermostat in Enrico's house, you have no chance to regulate your own house's temperature, because basically you are measuring a temperature which has nothing to do with the system you are feeding heat in and that you want to regulate. Okay, these are physical concepts, quite easy to explain by means of these common devices, but they will be useful in a while along the presentation. Also, in economics, we see many feedback loops. When stocks are rising, the belief that further rises are probable gives investors an incentive to buy, which is a positive feedback, reinforcing the rise. But the increased price of the shares and the knowledge that there must be a peak after which the market falls ends up deterring buyers and providing a negative feedback that stabilizes the rise and prevents the prices to going up indefinitely. Once the market begins to fall instead, some investors may expect further losing and refrain from buying. This is positive feedback, which basically make the fall, reinforces the fall. But others may buy because stocks become more and more of a bargain. And this is a negative feedback, stabilizing the fall. Very well known, very well rich and controversial tycoon George Soros used the word reflexivity to describe feedback in the financial markets, and even developed an entire investment theory based on this principle. Last example is tissue integrity. Every biological system is based heavily on feedback loops. Your hormones, your neural systems, your muscles, your even your heart works based on feedback loops. And normal tissue integrity is preserved by feedback interaction between diverse cell types, diverse immune system cell types, mediated by other molecules. And the failure of key feedback mechanisms in these systems is the cause behind diseases like cancer, which basically is disruption of the proper feedback loops and the proper signaling between cells. And we end up during cancer, we end up having key elements of this feedback fail. And this disrupts the tissue function and immunity. The key point is the back in feedback. Feedback is only useful when it triggers complete action afterwards. Feedback with no action is actually an open loop. That's why I insisted on closed loop, because if we, I mean, in HR world, it's discussed very often. We discuss about, we can discuss about asking for feedback. But if you ask for feedback and then you ditch it, and then you just act as if that feedback was never given, actually, it's like you never asked for that feedback. Feedback makes only sense if it gets back to the system that emitted the signal. Please don't misunderstand me. Sorry, don't misunderstand me. Deciding not to correct anything after having received feedback is a feasible action, is a feasible decision that we can explicitly make. Doing nothing is an option as long as we are actively pursuing action to correct any gap between the desired state and the current state. This is a key point for us today. And please, let's keep in mind that the back in feedback is as important as the feed part. I mean, also, the speed of the feedback is quite relevant. Can you imagine driving a car in which you have to plan for 10 minutes before you decide how to steer the wheel? If this was the case, you should definitely know what to do every step of the way while driving. Every single turn, every single road, and any obstacle could be potentially very dangerous. And instead, we are able to drive cars in real time, and we are even able to automate that procedure and have cars which drive themselves. This is related to the overhead. When I said that when I asked you to imagine to drive a car in which you have to plan for 10 minutes before turning, every time you have to turn the wheel, that is an example of what we call overhead, which is basically what defines the upper bound of the frequency by which we can collect feedback. We define overhead as the fixed cost that we have to pay to initialize a feedback system. How long does it take to set up some user research, to write a reliable business plan, to organize a software testing session? For any example that I made or anything that you can imagine, if it takes, let's say 1 day, then it's going to be impossible to get proper feedback every day. If I have to spend 1 day to set up a test, then how can I imagine to have 1 test per day? I would basically spend all my time preparing tests and not even executing them. So if overhead is high, we have a strong incentive to working in big batches, which means not having the chance to gather fast feedback from the environment. The higher, the more expensive the overhead, the setup timing, the slower the frequency, the lower the frequency that we can allow ourselves to get feedback, useful feedback on what we did. Okay, once we have clarified these key definitions, then if you saw the image back, you see that many of, you can see unit tests, functional tests, acceptance tests, continuous integration, many technical, we are in Avanscoperta, and so we can be a little bit skewed towards software practices. This presentation won't be only about software development, it will be about digital products, but still, when I was a developer, I was completely into test-driven development, and I still am whenever I code. But what happened after 2010? What happened during these last 10 years? In 2014, Martin Fowler came back and David Heinemeier Hansen met up to discuss this DHH sentence. Is test-driven development dead? This was the boutade, the explosive tweet that David Heinemeier Hansen, also known as DHH, tweeted. And this was an earthquake in the agile world. And I think this was a very healthy conversation that happened in a few videos, broadcasted by the three. It was a very healthy conversation to redefine and to extend, to broaden the concept of feedback in software, in the software world. So basically, DHH's point was that he thought that the old model was broken. The waterfall and final testing phase model was broken. So it was made like never testing your own code, having someone else, a tester, testing your own code and basically throwing into a quality assurance department a raw mess just because you know someone is going to clean after you. I'm quoting DHH here. But on the other extreme, it led to overconfidence. And DHH said that, I mean, it's not enough to say, I got tools that make me self-sufficient. That's what developers ended up thinking. And I can produce good software on my own. And it is something that I already knew back in 2014, but it was hard to make explicit. So basically, I already knew back in 2010 that I had to work with user interaction designers and other kind of professionals with a different skill set to make the robustness of my development life cycle more higher, to make it more robust. But still, I was too much focused on the inner life cycle. And DHH point is, I mean, it's relevant because, I mean, when he adds that you need someone who is not you to break the stuff that you developed before users do. Basically, if you write your own tests, you're gonna end up testing what you already think deserves some testing, which is basically opening the loop and making your software development lifecycle an open loop, which is not what we want. The cost of going, and the second argument that DHH brought, that is that the cost of going from 98% level of safety against bugs to 99% is the same cost that you pay to go from 99% to 99.9999%. It's exponential. It's an exponential cost. And if you are developing software for pacemakers or for an NASA module, you can look for such a high fidelity. But on the other hand, if you are providing web content in a very exploratory way, with a system that may not be even there in a few days, then definitely the fidelity you make, the fidelity you are aiming for, won't be worth its cost. You're always giving something away. And what I'm afraid of is a shallow understanding of what quality is. I mean, you see, there was, in this diagram, in this infographic, there was a strong accent on the inner life cycle of software. But, and this is due, I'm saying this is necessary, but I'm not saying that this is sufficient to deliver working software. Working by meaning, with working I mean producing a healthy and good and productive effect on the audience, on a given set of users. So we have to be aware of a shallow understanding of what quality is. When I had my second entrepreneurial experience, I basically crashed my company because I was all into an amazing software quality with adequate test coverage and a pretty domain-driven design-based architecture. It was back in 2006. But I was still missing a crucial characteristic of what it is a truly successful software. It has to be useful, perceived as such, known by people, and then in the end, it has to be sold some way. So before we go to the questions, it's nice to quote, I mean, for the sake of our of the remainder of the presentation, I want to focus on Ramaprasad definition of feedback, which is an information about the gap between the actual level and the reference level of a system parameter that is used to alter that gap in some way. I mean, this is a strong definition because it emphasizes that the information by itself is not feedback unless translated into action. It's basically stressing the back in feedback. So before we get some action, any question?
Not for the moment.
Okay.
But a lot of hellos. We have Fabrizio, Cristina, Eugenio, Alessandra.
Okay, I'm not daring to see the other screen because I don't want to disrupt my screen setup. So I will say ciao to everybody. I know you're there. I'm here for you. We love each other. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So how do we get into action then? Okay, Jacopo, fine. Lovely message, but what do you mean? Okay, this is what I mean. In 2011, so just right after creating the infographic that I've shown you, I came to know Steve Blank's body of work, which is well represented by, I will be getting back to the books afterwards, which is The First Steps to Epiphany and the Startup Owner's Manual, which are basically the books in which Steve Blank has spread the message about customer development philosophy, which was then made popular by Eric Ries, the Lean Startup. Now I'm going to show you a couple of examples of 3 Lean startups that I just ran in the last 4 months. So this is not something that I did back in 2011, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. It's something that I came to believe these are concepts which survived the test of time. And even 4 months ago, even yesterday, I will tell you something that happened in the last 2 days, is based, whatever I do when I try to develop a digital product is based on this concept. So the first example is ciafrolla. So ciafrolla is a meaningless word that sounds quite funny in Italian. Basically, we were thinking about engaging customers of restaurants in the moment in that idle moment that takes place between when the order is made and you are waiting for your order. In that interval, you are basically having people waiting, maybe chatting, but most of the time nowadays using a mobile phone to catch a QR code and see the menu. So once they're there with mobile phone, they have ordered. Is there any room to make them play with us anyhow? So the first feedback, the first question that we had, and the first feedback that we needed to collect from the market before touching any line of code was, maybe people don't want to play. maybe they don't, I mean, they want to just chat. But this was not my impression, actually. I see people being on the phones and not chatting. And so, okay, fine. So is it true? First, is it my opinion or is it true? And so we developed a two almost static screens application, which was very easy to develop. It was like 20 hours, like 10 hours and 10 hours to make it acceptable for the App Store. And then, this was made with a company which is called Jungle, which is involved. Basically, its business is about customer engagement for brands. And since they are great at collecting data through gamification, they have a so-called Jungle engine, which is a gamification as a service server. And so to have this test, to go in a restaurant and see whether people were available and willing to play with us, with our application, did we need the Jungle engine API? The answer is no. We developed a standalone application that was basically just implementing a fortune wheel. We would say like, okay, you spin the wheel and say, okay, you won prize, the reward number 3, number 4, number 5. Go to the cash and redeem your reward. Fine. So it's reward number 3, number 4, number 5. So did we have to include the names of the reward in the application and have everything with providing maybe a backend to the restaurant owners to upload their prizes and rewards? Actually, the answer is no. We just published so you see, the first page was the wheel. The second page was you won prize #3, #4, #12. Then in the restaurant, there was a sheet of paper basically saying number 12 is a coffee, number 4 is French fries. So, as I said, did we implement a backend to let them manage the rewards for their customers? No, it was static. It was hard-coded in the code because basically it was just meant to answer a very specific question, which was, maybe people don't want to play. Is it true? Okay, fine. Then, did we implement something like, you won the first prize, you won the second prize, you won the 4th prize? No, it was just hash and a number so that you can basically extract, valorize, put a value into a random number into a variable and print that variable as a string next to a hash, and you're done. This is all the user interface you have to code, all the front end that you have to code. And so, did we manage the win? So basically, we somehow registering the user and said no. And the minimal, not minimal, visual design, yeah, it was basically one nice screen, which was basically very close to this one. And then that was enough. It was, the morale was, Orazio, a Latin writer, said, primum vivere, dende philosophare, which basically means first you have to live, then you can talk about philosophy. And then we needed to know whether our system, our application could live before providing all the details that we had in mind, but that would be a useless expense before validating the whole idea, the whole pre-requirement with the users. So basically, we didn't need to develop a full-fledged mobile application. Then we had a second round. Ciafrolla reloaded, and this time it was the time to answer the question: users will never download an app while sitting at the table. Is it true? Okay, fine. They played. Okay, the tested positive. They are willing to play with us before getting the dinner, but they were assisted by us. What if we asked them with a paper on their table to download the application and adding up all that overhead. Or at least the question could be, how can we engage them even from that point on? Once again, we didn't develop an app. We didn't do anything. We just created collateral material to be put on the tables of testing test restaurants so that we could test what was working, what was working not. The problem is that, okay, fine, third round, Chafrolla revolution. You know, COVID-19 had slight side effects on restaurants worldwide, especially in Italy in these weeks. Okay, fine. So we couldn't perform those tests. And so we decided to test another part of the business model. And the question this time was, restaurant owners will restaurant owners understand the value of such a service? Is it true? Will they understand that if they can engage people on a digital medium, they can keep on talking with them even after the dinner is finished and before they get back into the restaurant just by chance? This is the key value proposition of this product. And so, again, we didn't develop an app. We didn't develop an app to be shown to the restaurant owners, but instead, we infiltrated in Facebook pages and groups made by and for angry restaurant owners, which are very angry nowadays because they complain. I mean, not completely by chance, because they don't have customers enough to sustain their business with the partial lockdown. And so instead of creating an app, instead of creating collateral, instead of creating a brochure, we had the community of restaurant owners already there and already willing to discuss what was happening and what could save them. And so we started chatting with them in Facebook pages and Facebook groups. And I mean, this is ongoing. We started this operation 2 days ago, and we are filtering useful information and golden content among the loads of blaming and alibi and rightly complaining about the situation. Again, no application, no mobile application to test a mobile application. Second example is Lo Capitolo. Lo Capitolo is, it's an idea for an application which is meant to engage the community of readers in Italy and maybe worldwide. We had in mind a few games. We had in mind a few things that we can do with a mobile app for sure, and a mobile app based on the Jungle engine. Yes, but before we get the developers dive into such a complicated task, like developing even this most simple application, we decided to start an Instagram profile and start replicating every gaming dynamics that we had in mind for the application within the platform that was already there and with a huge audience, Instagram. And so if you're from Italy, join the page Lo Capitolo, the new application to play with books. Again, no mobile application was needed to test a mobile application. And then last example is Ambrogio. Ambrogio is, it's a personal assistant service. So basically we were thinking about developing a service to help people do small tasks during the day, like receiving deliveries or taking the clothes to the laundry or something like that. And instead of development, we just developed a landing page that you see. You see, chiamaambrogio.it. It's the landing page, and in the landing page we are just providing a WhatsApp number that people can use to start chatting with us. And so this is called it's like fake it. I mean, the morale here is that we have to fake it until we make it, which is a quote by Kent Beck in Test-Driven Development by Example, which is basically the same philosophy applied not to the code, but to the whole product. So basically, people had the service delivered in September and October and paid and had no hassle. Basically, they had a completely seamless experience with us not developing not even a single line of code. Again, no application was used to develop a mobile application. It will be a mobile application, but only once we are sure about what people want and what people need. Any questions so far?
Still none. Let's go on, and I'm sure something will happen. It's a nice excuse for a break. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like having an ounce of sand in my throat. Okay, fine. Let's go on for the third part. This is the last part of this presentation. Now, I showed you some live action about getting some feedback, some end-to-end feedback when you are developing digital products, but what about personal feedback? Another thing that I forgot in this infographic was about the feedback that we have to get and that we need to get and that we should get and that we have to get as professionals while we are working on our digital products. It doesn't matter if you are freelancers, it doesn't matter if you are employees, it doesn't matter if you are entrepreneurs. We need to know that we are behaving the right way to generate the right value for our collaborator and customers. So, and this is where, in my experience, after 2010, I've seen in many different ways the feedback loop being destroyed by bad practices. The first concept that I want to focus on is the perverse incentive, which is an incentive that has an unintended and undesirable result that is contrary to the intention of its designers. Perverse incentives are basically a type of negative unintended consequence. A classic example, this is very nice. I mean, this is not in the word of employment, but it's a very nice example. A classic example is occurred when the British government offered a bounty for dead cobras with the intent of decreasing the wild cobra population. However, enterprising people began to breed cobras for the income. When the government became aware of this, the reward program was scrapped, causing the cobra breeders to set the now worthless snakes free. As a result, the wild cobra population further increased. I mean, and the term cobra effect was coined to describe a situation where an attempted solution to a problem actually makes the problem worse. Another example, this is a very nice story. 13 years ago, Bangkok police used tartan armbands. These are kilts, I know, but this was the only image about tartan that I found. Tartan is that kind of fabric. The policeman in Bangkok used tartan armbands as a badge of shame for minor infractions. But offending officers ended up wearing them as collectibles. It was an early experiment that was not encouraging. And I mean, Mr. Pongpat, the chief of the police in Bangkok, at first tried with the tartan, which was, sober enough. Then tartan armbands were issued, but were dismissed. But instead, the commanders met to reconsider the strategy and agreed that, I love this, I really love this, that Hello Kitty armbands might work better where tartan had failed. And so since 2007, since 2007, they have been using armbands with the cute Hello Kitty cartoon character to avoid the perverse incentive. And you see, this is the source is the New York Times, an article published in 2007. we have to admit that this brings in relevant consideration about gender neutrality implications in the police world, at least in Bangkok. But this is not our business today. It's I mean, the fact that Hello Kitty is a worse incentive than the tartan, I mean, it could be even nice, but still. So another example of perverse incentive that break the correct feedback loop is clickbaiting. Democracy is actually threatened by the drift of the press, because clickbaiting is creating the wrong incentives for the press and for the readers, basically creating feedback loops that don't converge toward healthy goals. They do converge toward goals, absolutely, but we cannot accept that these are healthy goals. For the sake of traffic and clicks, basically we are destroying one of the key, one of the key aspects of modern democracies. Okay, fine. Yesterday, during another meetup, I met one of Avanscoperta's friends, Emanuela Damiani, who said, I mean, she's working for a huge foundation which is providing a very important open source software, and she publicly stated, when you have a boss, when you have someone above you, efficiency may become more important than effectiveness. And I mean, the implication of these simple statements are amazing, because basically what she said is, since you are reporting to someone, you may be ending up using their feedback more to satisfy them rather than creating value for the market, in the market in which the two belong. Sorry, it was not clear. So basically I'm saying that if you have a boss, you end up working to satisfy them rather than creating value for your users out there. And so basically you are opening up the feedback loop with the real market, and you're closing up a loop with your boss, which may be very dangerous. And it was exactly the root cause of the problems I had when I was an employee. So basically I had the feedback loop with my direct report opened up for several reasons, including, poor personal problems of my boss. But then I realized that the feedback loop was open-ended, was an open loop only when it was too late for my collaboration to be given up, and I gave my resignation. I mentioned the perverse incentive because when you reward time in the companies, when you reward time usage rather than value creation, you end up having people who feel proud of staying at the office for a longer time. Which in turn, it just means that you are basically rewarding the least efficient people. I never saw a company rewarding people for being able to go home earlier than planned. And this is the right feedback loop I would like to see in place in companies and organizations. Beware. This is not equivalent to saying that the least you do, the better you are. I'm not available in being challenged as if this was what I said. I'm only saying that if we believe in incentives, if we want to give feedback to our employees, to our coworkers, then it makes no point ending up complaining about something that you are instead incentivizing. So basically, you want people to be efficient, fine. Give them prizes, give them reward for finishing earlier rather than later. And then you will end up having people who care about delivering value in an efficient way. Another thing that we saw that I came to see about we are close to the end now. Another thing that I came to see belonging to the feedback domain in the last 10 years is the concept of capped cost. So I don't want to talk too much about antifragility because there are other meetups, Avanscoperta meetups about this, and there is no need to repeat myself. But let me just give you an example. If you know what stand-up meetings are, you can understand that they cap the cost of alignment and the investment on serendipity, while you may get in return the prevention of disasters. You pay 15 minutes every day to meet everybody and try to smoke out problems. Fine. Now, if antifragility is the property of systems to get better while never getting too bad, basically we're saying that every time we cap the cost of prevention measures and we keep ourselves open to disproportionate positive outcome like preventing disasters, then we are anti-fragile. I mean, like insurance policies are, you pay a fixed small fee to be protected for rare, improbable, very high damages. This is tricky to visualize because it's very hard to spot the effects of prevention. I mean, since it's very common to see the to misunderstand the absence of evidence as the evidence of the absence, the more effectively preventive actions are undertaken, the less useful they may seem. And so basically you have a working feedback loop. This happened a few weeks ago with a team I was working with, and they said, okay, fine, but we could get rid of stand-up meetings. Everything is going fine now. It's been 6 months, 7 months. Why don't we just have the stand-up meeting every 2 days or 3 days? And I replied them, hey, nothing happened and everything is stable because you are having that stand-up meeting every day, getting feedback, passive feedback on any problem that may arise. No one can be sure here that if we didn't have that frequency, no problem would arise. So basically, if everything goes fine because you prevented something to go wrong, the best that you can get is no evidence that this is working. Actually, you can see that everything is going fine, and you don't need firefighters extinguishing fires. Hey, Novax, I'm looking at you. For similar reasons, the feedback you get when you ask for feedback is not showing you anyway the feedback you are not getting. I mean, this is the turkey paradox is well known. I mean, you got this turkey being fed up by a generous farmer every day for years, and every day the turkey receives the food from the end of the gracious farmer. In a few days, that farmer will kill the turkey because it's going to be Thanksgiving Day. The feedback that the turkey was getting about the farmer was true, but it didn't tell anything about a bigger picture. And this is a problem every time we frame our feedback in a peculiar grid. That's what I don't like about MBOs, OKR, and blah, blah, blah. That's because I want the feedback about me to be as schemaless, as free as I can. And I want the mindset of the people who are providing me with that feedback to be injected into myself rather than reverse. I don't want to ask feedback according to my own mind structure. I want to ask for feedback to someone by asking them what they think and what they feel about the way I'm generating value for them, or I'm trying to generate value for them, without asking any specific question. There is an article that I will share in the chat, which is about how I used the Net Promoter Score as a, non-perfect but useful way to gather feedback from my colleagues when I was an employee. Last but not least, contracts. Back in 2010, I was not even aware that this could be such a diverse topic, such a deep field. In the meantime, I wrote a book in Italian, and now I'm writing an English book. Yesterday, I finished the final draft of the second part out of 3. But 2 principles which are featured in extreme contracts, you may find very easily material online. If you look for extreme contracts principles, you're gonna find there are articles of mine on Vasco Duarte's blog. But 2 principles are very relevant for feedback for our presentation today. Chaos in small doses. Since a collaboration with someone is a chaotical space, chaotical as we define it in Cynefin framework, since every collaboration is chaotical, we cannot control it. If I collaborate with Enrico, I don't know whether, I can assume that Enrico is going to be honest and good. But what if he has family problems that distract them from our collaboration? What if he decides to follow that partner in New Zealand and leave everything behind in Italy? So since collaborations are inherently chaotical, embedded with uncertainty, then we should split our agreement in small doses. No contract should have you working too long without being paid. And this is a proper way to get feedback. Listen to me. This is the only statement I want to be remembered for today. A bank transfer is a way to receive feedback about the quality of your work. Once you get the feedback about the bank transfer, you know that your work was accepted and willingly. Before the bank transfer, you always have the lower hand, which doesn't mean that you have to rob your customers. It just means that you have to shape your agreements in short transactions, in small transactions. Again, the last 2 slides. Bureaucracy, I couldn't end up without quoting Nassim Taleb even today. Bureaucracy is a construction by which a person is conveniently separated from the consequences of his or her actions. Skin in the game is the ultimate feedback loop that you can put in place in any human system. If you are checking often that your counterpart is acting on an ethical basis rather than just according to the rules, then you can be sure that the collaboration is healthy. Then you are getting the proper feedback about the collaboration. And skin in the game was not included in this image. Basically, I was too young. I hadn't read enough. But skin in the game is the wider feedback loop that we could represent on this image is skin in the game. If you get skin in the game from every parties involved in a project, in a product, in a collaboration, then for sure you're gonna have the real ultimate end-to-end feedback loop in place. Any question?
Yes. I was doing a nice tweet about what you just said, but I'll leave it for later. Those questions are more important. So thanks for your talk. And now let's go to the questions. So we have a couple from Christina. I'll start off with the first one.
Just one thing, Enrico.
Please.
After the question, I've got 3 slides to show. So please consider the timing with just 3 slides more, okay?
Okay, if that's the moment to read all the questions we've had so far, I'll do that. Otherwise, we go with the others. What do you
No, it's
recommend?
fine. It's
Okay.
fine. It's fine.
Fine. So, Christina, these go back to the previous part. So, in case of Ambrogio or the other products as well,
yeah,
all cool and clever so far. But how do you know if it's not enough? Basically, what you're doing is not enough. And thanks, Christina, for the tweet as well. And the other part is, how do you know if there is more in that idea than the WhatsApp connection. I hope I got it right. Christina, in case, write me in the chat.
Okay, fine. So this is a session about how we get feedback about what we thought. This is not a session about how do we generate ideas. So this is not a question. This is not a session about the feed of the feedback, but it's more a session about the back in feedback. And so basically what I'm saying here is I'm not avoiding your question. I'm saying that I don't know, how do you generate ideas and how do you conceive the whole vision of your digital products? But any way you do it, you should validate it as soon as possible. And as soon as possible means I see rarely meaning, I seldom see it meaning not developing a single line of code. Usually when people talk about prototyping, they talk about coding or rough application. That's too late. You don't need an application to do close to everything that you can get done by an application. So what I'm saying is that how can you be sure that there is not anything more? Basically, that's the non-methodological part. So basically, when you collect the feedback, I mean, there is the same problem in science. Science is about, everybody knows this. You have an hypothesis, you perform experiments, and you validate or falsify the hypothesis. Fine, but no one ever discuss how do you generate hypotheses, and that is the art part in science. Obviously, there are suggestions. It's plenty of articles. I looked for articles about this last week. There are plenty of articles suggesting the way you can trigger the formulation of powerful hypotheses, but still, there are two kinds of skills for scientists: designing cheap experiments, cheap, meaningful experiments, and have an intuition for very powerful hypotheses. Einstein was the second type. Those who are probably working on the vaccines these days are the first types. I hope, Christina, I have answered your question. Otherwise, I will give you afterwards my contacts so that we can discuss this further. Enrico, next one.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jacopo. So other is from Davide Bellettini, which we say hello to.
Ciao, Davide.
So is Ambrogio prototyping? Da-da.
Absolutely. It is prototyping 100%.
Okay.
Though prototyping doesn't mean to build a rough model of prototyping in engineering usually basically means, okay, I'm prototyping a car, so I build one single piece of a car, which is too costly it's gonna cost more than the serial product version. In the digital world, we have one chance more. We can prototype the value proposition even before prototyping the key resource, which is the application and the software that you will develop afterwards. But that's prototyping.
Excellent. So we have a couple more from Matteo. Hi, Matteo. Thanks for the question. So the three examples you made are to assess the gamification API as a product, or are you talking about different customer products?
I'm talking about full-fledged end user applications, actually, which may or not may rely on the software as a service on the engine behind. It doesn't matter. That's the point. First, we validate the desirability and the feasibility, and then we build the real thing.
Cool. We have another one from Matteo, and then, of course, you can ask more, but I guess after this, we'll move on to the slides and then close up if there are more questions. So, Matteo again, do you think you can teach a company or a team the skin in the game mindset or a radical feedback approach, or you should join a company that is already like-minded? Good one.
But okay, this is a good question. basically, you were talking about my last 17 years. Okay, and I had my own companies. I was an entrepreneur 3 times. I've been an employee 2 times. And in the gaps in between, I've been a freelancer, and now it's been 5 years being a freelancer. And I mean, I have no single valid answer. I met because I mean, I can tell you my experience, which is anecdotal. I don't have any general validity in my answers today, but I mean, when I was an entrepreneur, I thought that I could found my own companies to work the way I've always wanted to work. And I realized that it was not possible, because the partners have their own vision, their own idea, and you have to mediate. As an employee, I wanted to work the way I wanted, and I couldn't, because the boss and the colleagues have their own mindset, and which may not even, I mean, I'm saying that they can be even, they can have a mindset and ideas that are more powerful than yours. I mean, you can be the wrong one. That's fine. As a freelancer, the reason why I'm a freelancer is that, at least for my own business model, I can act whatever I want, anyhow. But as a consultant, I say that once in a while you find companies which are sensitive to this, which are listening to the message, and they start, I mean, for example, Jungle, the company I'm working the most nowadays, they didn't know anything about skin in the game. They didn't know anything about customer development. And now we are having these endeavors together, and it's going to be tons of fun and tons of success. With success, I don't mean, you see, I told you that the second iteration of Chafralla went busted, but I mean, that's a success anyway, because we are learning and converging toward a successful product. The point is that I mean, there is so much told and articles written about the ethics of failure, so that we should be embrace failure, that we should use failure, fail fast and whatever. I mean, that's necessary, but not sufficient. I want to be at ease with failure because it teaches me something, but I don't want to aim at failure. The only startup that works is the one who creates value and sustainable value, thus creating money for the owners. And this is a key point. But still, I mean, especially in the case of Lo Capitolo and Ambrogio, they are, I mean, the feedback is very useful. We are pivoting every week. I mean, our cycle is weekly. I hope to have answered. So basically, the synthetical answer is yes, it's very hard, but it's not impossible. And when it happens, cling to those chances. When you find a company that lets you work the way you want to work, whatever it is, stick to it.
Awesome. Good one, Jacopo. And we are done with the questions for now. So I guess we are in for the last 3 slides.
Okay, just this is for your information. So there is an Extreme Contracts newsletter. It's very low traffic. And nowadays, it's just like 3 emails per year. And I promise it will never be more than 2 emails per month, even next year when the book will be probably out. This is the short link. It's very easy. It's bit.ly/Extreme Contracts newsletter, capital first letters. Then on jacoporomei.com, in the homepage, you find any contact of mine. So you find me on every social network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. You find the email and my mobile phone. So if you have something to ask about this presentation, if you have any comment to do, and especially if you got negative feedback for me, don't worry. I'm pleased to listen to everything you want to say about this session that we shared today. I'm so pleased to have held it. I mean, it was the first time, and I thank once again Avanscoperta for giving me the chance to talk to an audience. Thank you. Thank you so much. And let me say that the slides were made with the help of Valentina the Skunk Palazzo, which we had a part of the slides and Shafrolla action. So thanks to her too.
Thanks, Valentina, as well, but mainly thank you, Jacopo, and all of our learners who joined us today as well. So I shared a couple of links in the sorry, I was reading the chat. In the chat, so it's mainly a feedback form if you want to let us know how it went, so we can get that, and also a link to Jacopo's upcoming workshop. It's going to be next March in English, and some of the things we talked about will be there, of course, and many more. If you are a freelancer and want to understand how to still sleep at night and have a proficient working life. And I guess that is it. Thank you very much.
You can share the article about using MPS to improve the value as an employee, which is a link that I mentioned during the presentation. If you want, as the last goodies.
There you go. Yes, Christina, let's test feedback on feedback. Absolutely. Good one.
Yeah.
Yes, so thanks a lot. Thank you, Jacopo, again. We'll see you.
We
have another meetup. I'll do the spoiler on the 11th of November with Matteo Cavucci, another friend of ours, about the cost of delay. So more details.
I'll be there.
Please do. More details on our meetup channel where we publish everything. Make sure you subscribe to that and the YouTube channel as well. So thanks a lot, everyone. We are learners. To the next one.
Ciao.
Bye.